Hola, buenas tardes. I was going to say buenos dias. Nice to see you guys. I can see that we have Kalie in the studio today. Hola, mademoiselle. And we have Ryan here as well. How's it going, Ryan? And hello to all of you at home or on your mobile device. Maybe you're in the library checking us out here. And I am John McNertney from Green Ocean Global Advisors. We're coming to you live from Portugal today, or if you're watching this on a rebroadcast, we love you too. So we're going to go ahead and get the screen share started here, synchronizing your Post Portugal reality. And we are fortunate today to have a guest who I'm going to introduce in a moment. First, this word from our legal team. They said that we have to tell you that if you're not a paying client of Green Oceans, this is just for fun. That's right. This is for educational purposes only. So all the material that we are about to present is presumed to be true. It is in most cases the product of our lived experiences as expatriates and financial advisors. If you'd like to know more about us, you can check us out online. You for sure can check out our illustrious guest today online, and please do so. So a bit about us, in case you haven't met us before. This is me. My name is John, and I am from San Francisco, California. But for the last 5 years, I've been living in Lisbon, Portugal. There are a lot of other facts and figures that are not that important to go through today. If you'd like to know more about me or you'd like to chat with me, just hit me up via email, or you can go to our website. We've also got Ryan. We took these photos about a month ago when we were in Porto to visit Josh and Kalie, as a matter of fact. And this is in the Livraria de Lelo. But what's important is that Ryan is our Chief Investment Officer. Ryan has substantially assisted clients at Green Ocean for years now. And in fact, he manages the trading desk and co-authors a lot of our investment strategies. He's based out of San Francisco, California today, and he covers our Western office. What else is there to know? I think Ryan will take you through it himself momentarily. He's going to guide our segment a little bit later on the markets. We'll talk about oil and Iran and all the fun things that we're experiencing these days. Kalie is going to talk hopefully quite a lot. Hello, Kalie. And man, what can I say? Kalie and her husband Josh are the co-hosts of Expats Everywhere. They are creeping towards 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. Oh my God! And they're just down to earth and really super nice people that happen to know everything about this world that we live in as expatriates. So I'm going to pass the ball to her in just 1 second. But before we do, we're going to cover the outline, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I think that Americans are choosing Portugal these days. Okay. So first of all, am I muted? Okay, my screen told me I was muted. First of all, we are going to talk about why Americans are moving to Portugal still. Then we're going to talk about the synchronization framework. Our firm helps individuals that are making this move. And so we have discovered that there are some predictable intervals that we experience in the process of. We're going to talk about those phases from 1 through 4. We will give you a checklist that you can make use of. Please ask us for the reprints of this broadcast after today's event. And then we'll talk about some other things, such as pitfalls Americans face. We'll engage in some delightful Q&A, I hope. And that is the extent of it. But in case you're wondering, remember, this is just about you, okay? Like, even though I live this thing like every day, I do hope that we'll get some raised hands. I hope we'll get some great chatter. And to that extent, is the chat open? No, the Q&A is open, isn't it, Ryan? Yes.
Indeed, and I'll be managing that for us here today. Hi, everybody.
Q&A. Yeah, because the chat just gets out of hand, guys. So I'm sorry, but we won't be opening up the general chat. That's just a me thing. I don't know. It always makes me nervous when I see all these phrases flying around. But populate the Q&A with your questions. So why, oh, why are we still doing this? Why do Americans choose Portugal? Well, before I get to the list, I got to say, as a lifelong resident of California, when I first moved to Portugal 5 years ago, I felt like I was at home. Sinto-me a casa, as os portugueses dizem, porque I thought, man, it looks just like San Jose, California. And man, if it doesn't. But it has some things that San Francisco didn't have. And namely, number one here is safety and peace. Because, man, if you've lived in San Francisco lately, it doesn't feel quite as low down, or it's pretty low down. It doesn't feel as low key as the overall vibe that you experience here. And I live in Lisbon, which is a very metropolitan place, but it's still thoroughly European. And so it's very urbane, very sedate. And Portugal is ranked seventh globally in the Global Peace Index. The cost of living is still very low. There have been some changes to that I know Kalie and I are going to chat about. And so we have to be specific that a couple outside of Lisbon or Porto can live comfortably on 2,500 to 3 grand per month. Healthcare is fantastic in Portugal. Portugal ranks just below Spain as one of the top healthcare systems for expats globally. And I don't know if this is a selling point or not. There goes the neighborhood, but the growing US community here. There's a lot of US persons that have recently been moving to Portugal. There's been about a 36% increase in a single year from 2023 to 2024. And I promise you that that story has not reached its end. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Kalie because I want Kalie to tell us, frankly, more than I can because they've been here even longer than we have. So I'm going to pass the mic to her.
Well, thanks, John, for having me. And of course,
Yeah.
thanks for that really nice introduction. And we're definitely going to dive in. A couple of things that you already mentioned, I'm going to unpack a little more as well. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kalie. And like John said, my husband and I have had Expats Everywhere since 2015. So we have lived abroad since 2009. And along the way, we found that we liked helping people with living and moving abroad. And so that's how Expats Everywhere started. And it's evolved from different needs since then. But then also last year, I started a bespoke relocation company called Slate and Key. So I'll talk a little bit more about that and what the difference is between the two a little later. But let's go ahead and jump into Portugal. Just a little bit about me. Like John said, I've been living abroad 16 years, almost 17, coming in on 17 in 5 different countries outside of the US. You can see at the bottom where I put the countries that I've lived in. The joke was always, we only live in places that started with S until Portugal. And so now Portugal is new and unique to that. It doesn't start with an S, but it's actually the longest place we've lived so far as well. And we love to travel. We love the adventure. And we have been to 85 countries and counting. I say and counting because over the Easter break, we are going to add a couple more new ones to our list. So that's exciting too. All right, let's jump in. So my big question for you today is why do you want to move to Portugal? And this is going to be personal for everyone. It was different for me. It was different for my husband. It's different for a lot of people that we talk to. So I think the important thing is for you to think about why do you want to move to Portugal? Far less of like why you want to maybe leave where you currently live and why Portugal would be the place that you actually want to move to. But a few reasons that I'm seeing that people want to move is because one would be the better work-life balance, which is very true. Culturally here, there is a better work-life balance. Now, that being said, I do always joke that when you get here and your internet goes out and you want the guy to show up right away because your internet's out, well, remember they have a work-life balance. So he's probably taking his little break at the cafe downstairs before he comes up and sees you. So while you do enjoy this work-life balance shift that you could have in Portugal, because it is ingrained in their culture, you have to remember that everyone is enjoying that work-life balance. But it's definitely a good one, especially if you're in the US and you can get caught in the rat race, a lot of work, and maybe you feel like you're not living the life that you want to live. And so Portugal is a good place to offer that. Safety is definitely a big one. Like John touched on the Global Peace Index, Portugal is number 7 in the world, which is amazing. Currently, the US is 128. So unfortunately, it's far lower than what we're seeing in Portugal. So overall safety is very comfortable here. And depending on the stage of life you're in, will probably vary on how important that is. But just to give you an idea, when I first moved abroad in 2009, I was young. I didn't care about safety, which I'm sure my parents were like, oh my gosh, like you need to care about that. You're a young female. But I didn't. I was more for the adventure travel that I'll get to at the bottom of the screen here. But I wasn't thinking as much about safety. Now, though, I have a daughter. And so now with kids, that's one of the top priorities of when we live anywhere, but also when we travel. So priorities can definitely shift and that's okay. But what's great is that Portugal is offering so many varieties of things that make it a good country to think about. Then you've got the European lifestyle. It's just different than the US lifestyle. So you might find that you enjoy that type of lifestyle better. Affordability, of course, is something that's big. The US, we obviously are seeing rising costs in the US. Portugal, while costs are going up here, it's still far less than what we're seeing in the US. So affordability is nice. And that opens up the door for you to maybe do things that you want to do that you can't do in the US, or you just choose not to because of the price. So you can do some of those things more often. Maybe it's getting your nails done, getting a massage, or just travel. And so, like I said, adventure, travel. What's really nice when you live in Portugal is you're based in Europe. And so when you want to just pop on over to a different country, you can. You can easily do it. There are affordable prices, especially if you can be flexible on when you do it. So the adventure and travel is something that Portugal offers. And so you have to think about your why. Why do you want to move to Portugal? Is it any of these or is it something else? But when you have the why out in front of you, then it makes the whole process a lot more exciting. And when you do hit some of these barriers that are stressful, because you will hear about the bureaucracy here, when you hit some of these problems, when you keep your focus on why you want to move, then it's a little easier and a little less stressful to get past those. So what you do need to keep in mind is that you have to set up a timeline, and this is going to be personal for everyone, what the timeline is going to be like. And it has to be realistic. If you want to leave in the next week, it's probably not going to happen for a variety of different reasons. Not so much just that the visa process is, taking longer than that, but you want to successfully close things down in the US and implement the right strategies so that when you're here, you don't have this, oh gosh, I have to go back to the US because I didn't realize I needed to do this before leaving. Or sometimes you actually get stuck. Like if it's a tax thing and you're already a tax resident here, if you would have known that you should have done something before moving that would have maybe minimized your tax burden, then you could have done that before and now you're a bit stuck. So you want to make sure that you set up a realistic timeline that's going to be comfortable for you, but then it's also going to be doing these little things that maybe you don't know you should be doing, but you have someone along the way guiding you to show that do this so that you have a successful journey in Portugal. Of course, you need to know the visa that you're going to be coming in on, obviously, but then you also need to be thinking beyond the visa. And we'll chat a little bit about this as well as we go back and forth. And I'm happy to answer questions too. But I think that you get so fixated on the visa, you forget all the other aspects of the move. So again, it can be stressful if you forgot something, but then you also lose the joy of it as well, right? I mean, yes, you have to have a visa, obviously, but there are other parts that go into it. And remember, it's an exciting time to be moving. So you don't want the visa just to be such a main focus that it's bogging you down. So you want to go beyond the visa and you want to be prepared as well. So I will obviously talk about the visas because you do need that. And then I'm going to go beyond the visa as well. There are a variety of visas that you can look into. You've got entrepreneur ones, you've got student, you've got short-term visas. But the top three that are most common for Americans are the D7, the D8, and the golden visa. Now, the D7 and the D8, they do not come with work permits in the sense that you can't work in the country. You can on both of them have some online business or online activity, though. Unlike, for example, the non-lucrative, which is the comparable visa in Spain, is to the D7, you are not allowed to work. So at least if you come in on the D7, you can still work online. Both of them, though, they're very similar. But the big difference is with the D7, it's living off of individual revenue in a passive capacity. And the D8 is living off of individual revenue in an active capacity. So what does that mean? For the D7, when you're applying, that means it has to be applying with a 401k, a pension. If you have rental properties, the rent from there. It's not a quote unquote retiree visa because you don't actually have to be retired or you don't have to be at retirement age to access this visa. It just has to be showing your financial stability through a passive capacity. And then with the D8, it's an active capacity, meaning that you own your own company and you take a salary. You're a freelancer. Your company allows you to work anywhere in the world. You need to check though if you can live anywhere and work anywhere in the US, you do want to check with your company if you are allowed to move abroad because that's something that they do have to approve. But this is you're making your money in an active way. So I'm going to unpack those a little more. And then, of course, you do have the golden visa. And the golden visa is a great option for one of two things, or maybe both of these things. If you can't move right now, but you want to start working towards the process of permanent residency and citizenship, then the golden visa is a really good option for you because you can get the ball rolling. So maybe if you have a longer runway, and the timeline is a little further out, but you want to start working towards a bit more stability in Portugal, then the golden visa is good. The other one would be your taxes. If you don't want to pay taxes in Portugal right now for a variety of different reasons, you don't have the stay requirement that the D7 and the D8 come with. They are residency visas, so you do have to be here and be a tax resident. With the golden visa, you don't, which is amazing. So they all have different perks depending on where you are in the process. But when we're talking about requirements, especially for the D7 DA, I'm going to focus a bit more on those because the Golden Visa does a little bit of its own thing. So it does have good perks, but I'm going to focus on what it looks like to apply for the D7 DA because these are the residency visas. So these are, you're wanting to move to Portugal now. So what do you have to do? You have to apply from your home country. So if you're in the US, you have to apply from the US, and you don't actually get to choose where you apply. It depends on what state you're in. So, for example, if you're in California, then you're going to go to the VFS office in San Francisco. And VFS is a third-party organization that helps countries process visas. So you might not actually go directly through the Portuguese consulate. Depending on your state, there in the Northeast, for example, there are a few states that you don't go through VFS. You do actually go through the consulate. So you don't get to choose this. You just need to be aware of where you actually apply for your visa. Then in speaking with about the financial stability, again, the D7 and the D8, they're a little different in the sense that the D7 is pegged just to minimum wage. And currently minimum wage is 920 euros a month. It is going to go up next year. It's been steadily going up by 50 euros until it gets a little higher. So if you're thinking about applying next year, just know that right now it's 920, but if you apply in 2027, it's going to be 50 euro more. So it is pegged to minimum wage, and that is for the main applicant. And then if you're coming with a spouse and or children, dependents, then there's a percentage that you need to do for each person. And then you add all of that up, and that's what you need to prove that you're making on a monthly basis. So the main applicant is minimum wage. Your spouse is 50% of that, and then each minor dependent is 30%. So that's for the D7. Now for the D8, the main applicant is 4 times the amount of minimum wage. Then the spouse and the kids are also the 50%, 30%, but not of that huge total. That's the 4 times amount, just of minimum wage again. So the only times 4 part is for the main applicant. So
And remember,
920
Kalie,
times 4.
that for the first one, for the D7, it's passive income. So just
Yes.
for those of you that are tracking, like this means dividends. This means anything that's on the
Yes.
investment side. You can also use that to create that 900 euro plus. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. So I was mentioning the different ways that you could show passive capacity. And that is one that a lot of clients do use. If you own your own company, you can draw dividends off of your own company as well. And that puts it in the passive category, as opposed to if you own your own company and you pay yourself a salary, then that's going to be the D8 because it's active. So yeah, there are ways to work around to show that it's passive. And if you can do that, it's actually better because you obviously have to show far less per month compared to the D8. And so, John, I'm sure you'll chat a little bit more about what that looks like on the financial side as well.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
then some other requirements, and this isn't exhaustive, but these are some of the big ones, is you do have to have housing. So if you purchase a property here, then you can show that as your proof of accommodation. But if you haven't purchased yet or don't plan on it, then you do have to have a rental contract, and it has to be at least for a year. So you do have to have a lease as part of the requirements. And then you have to have a funded Portuguese bank account. And this has to be funded for a year to show. So if it's just you, then you fund it for, let's say, 920 if you're doing the D7. But if you have dependents, then that monthly equation that you do times that by 12. And that's what you're supposed to fund your Portuguese bank account with. It's supposed to show that you have financial stability for the year in case something happens, and that it's already over in Portugal in euros, ready to go. Now, the good thing about that is it's not like it just sits there and you can't access it, like it's just hovering there and you can't use it. You can actually use it. So once you come here, start using it it's a Portuguese bank account, so start using it for groceries, rent, whatever you want to. So you just have to have it funded when you have that appointment. Then you need your background check and health insurance, and your health insurance needs to include repatriation. Then, of course, you have different documents that need to be notarized or apostilled. If you're moving with kids, it's going to be some extra documentation with, birth records and marriage license and so on, because you have to prove that you're allowed to bring kids internationally. So this isn't exhaustive, but this kind of gives you an idea. There is a lot to do, but as long as you know what there is to do, especially if you have someone helping you out, going in the right order, not doing certain things too soon because some things are time sensitive, but knowing what order to go in, then it's not so stressful or overwhelming.
So Kalie, we had a good question. You can change
Yeah.
visas after you get here, right? Somebody asked, can you
Yes.
come on like a D8 and then decide that you don't want to work as much? I want to switch over to a D7. You could do that, right?
Yes, you can. Yeah. I get asked that a lot. You are allowed to retire. If you're working for a couple more years and then you want to retire, you are allowed to. No worries. So what happens is these are both residency, they're like residencies. So although you come in on a specific visa and they have the same stay requirement, the visa doesn't really follow you. It's more because you're a temporary resident. So the process then would be, after you have the IMA appointment, which I'm going to run through the timeline here, After you have the IMA appointment, your card, you are a temporary resident and it's good for 2 years. And then you have to renew and it's good for 3 years. Then when you get through the 5 years, you can apply for permanent residency. And currently you can still apply for citizenship. That has not changed yet. Although there's a lot of misinformation out there that it has changed. It has not actually changed. So still 5 years, there's a lot of movement that you can do. But yes, if you change in the meantime, or let's just say you actually want to work in the country, since like I said earlier, neither of these come with a work permit. If you want to work in the country, you can change that while you're here. You don't have to leave and go through this process all over. So you are allowed to make changes for sure.
So political updates, Kalie, just for people that are paying attention, when are we going to get that vote on the 5 to 10 year change? I mean, that hasn't really, yeah.
Okay, it's not actually in there like on the plans yet. They are meeting April 1st, but it is not in the lists of things that they are going to be discussing April 1st, the actual citizenship part. They're going to be discussing some other things, but depending on how far they get in that meeting, will depend, because if they have to push some stuff from that meeting into the next one, then it wouldn't necessarily be the next one. But we're looking at it probably being one of their meetings, end of April, beginning of May. But, they keep saying they're going to be talking about it, and then something comes up that pushes it. So potentially end of April, beginning of May, but also expect it to be pushed as well. So still no hard timeline on that yet.
Nice. I just wanted to quickly, really quick, there was a question that I typed an answer to, and we get this one a lot. So someone asked, can you use portfolio liquidation for proof of passive income? And, I looked at the word liquidation. That means sell out your entire account. To be clear, distributions from an investment account into a Portuguese bank account, plus a letter from us. We've done that multiple times for many people. That's working pretty well for D7 visa application process. So you don't need to dump out all your investments. You don't even need to force the portfolio to have enough passive income. We can sell a little bit as long as that distribution happens at least minimum wage over to the Portuguese bank account. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yep.
I saw you type that, and I was going to have to address that, but yeah, thanks. And you can also do other things. I have a gentleman who just contracted with me to do a 72T with him. That's a systematic distribution from an IRA prior to 59 and a half. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. One of the things that people just don't understand frequently is this is a hybrid situation. You're in Portugal and the US at the same time. The Portuguese are oftentimes wanting to just see if it looks like a duck and if it quacks like a duck, and then they will call it a duck. So you really just have to make sure that things look right, and they will mostly accept your narrative.
Yes, that's very important. You have to make it look right because they don't like to think outside the box here. So if it's too tricky looking for them, even though you might show massive, financial stability, if it's too tricky looking, then that might confuse them and they don't know what it is. So there are a lot of different ways that you could show proof of finances. You just want to make sure it's packaged in the right way and it looks nice and pretty and simple for them to be like, okay, yes, this is what is required and we can move on. But yeah, lots of options of ways that you can do it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move on then, thinking of a realistic timeline and a plan. Again, everyone's a little different with what this is going to look like, but you have to be realistic in the sense that while you are working on your visa, there are other things that you can be doing in the pre-move. So, for example, if you live in a state that has high state taxes, it's possible that will follow you to Portugal. So maybe you want to domicile in a different state so that you're not paying these state taxes. And I'm sure John will, talk a bit more about that as well. But and California, I think is kind of a bad one. No, don't want to hate on California, but we do have clients who want to move out of California because if you're cutting all ties, now if you own a business or a house there, then it's a little different. But if you want to cut all ties so that you're not paying state taxes while actually living in Portugal, then there are ways that you could do that. But all of that stuff has to be done before you move. So thinking about the pre-move, of course, you've got all the visa stuff. The visa timeline will vary depending on how quickly you can get things done. But, a month or 2 months is a realistic time to collect everything as long as you're moving well on that. But then thinking about the pre-move, are you selling your home? What does that look like? Are you doing an estate sale? Are you selling off your things? So be thinking about that. But then also, do you need to do any last minute health checks? You want to make sure you get your health records as well. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But just be thinking about if you're closing things out where you're moving from, making sure that you kind of not cut all ties, but that you tidy everything up. So are you forwarding your mail or is it going to a family member or a friend? Well, you need to start changing the addresses over and then test running it to make sure that it works really well. Are you doing a virtual bank so that you can transfer money? It's not really good to transfer money from a US bank to a Europe bank, so you don't want to do that direct. You maybe want to do one that has a better currency exchange. So setting all that stuff up and test running it. so that when you do move over here, you don't run into any like gotchas. So this is some of the pre-move stuff that you can be doing for several months beforehand. And then, of course, collecting all of your visa requirements and then getting that appointment. And then you have your visa appointment. So like I mentioned earlier, you'll either go through VFS or through the consulate. You take all of your documents to that appointment, and then they process everything and they'll let you know, sometimes they tell you how long it's going to take. It's taking 2 to 3 months or so on average. So that means after you have your visa appointment, there are things that you can also be doing in the meantime. Now, if you bought a place in Portugal or you have a rental, some people in that in between time, you can keep your passport and come over here on your normal like 90-day tourist visa so that you can start setting up your life and getting used to the area. And then when you get the approval, you can go back to get that stamp put in, the sticker put into your passport. So that's something you could be doing, but maybe you're still just closing things out. So in the meantime, you have 2 or 3 months in between your actual visa appointment and then when you move to be doing stuff. So are you shipping things? Then you need to think about that. And you need to also time that so that you don't have import taxes when you get here. Because if, as a resident, you do have a little bit of a waiver. So you want to work with a company who understands that. Maybe pets, if you're bringing your pets, thinking about having them updated on their health certificates. And then there's stuff that you do closer to your departure date. But maybe you're looking into different flights. You have commercial flights. What does that look like? You have pet relocation companies, or you even have chartered planes that you could do. So in the meantime, in between your actual appointment to when you move, there's a lot that can be done. And then you have your move. So you move here, hopefully a successful and a stress-free move, but then you're not done yet, because once you actually move here, you do have to do an in-person appointment with IMA. IMA is the governing body that processes the visas right now. So you do have to finalize your residency by going to an in-person appointment where you show the documents again, same documents. They take your picture, biometrics, and then at that point, they'll let you know about how long it'll take for them to mail the card to you. And then you are a resident. You get your temporary residency card. So that's what finalizes your residency. And then, of course, it's like the post move in real life. I think you don't want to get so focused on all this visa process and I have to do this, and you lose the fact that you're actually moving and living here. So, what does real life look like? So, you want to also be mentally preparing for that. And then, even when you come here before your IMA appointment, because it could take a couple months to get that IMA appointment to finalize your residency. So, at that point, how are you setting up life? What are you doing that's making it comfortable for you? Because if you are renting a place, maybe it came furnished, but there's going to be certain things that even like a specific kitchen utensil that you're like, okay, where can I find that? And this is where you need to start networking and building your community. Also, I think this is good to note that you don't want to be in a place that's super remote, because it's going to be hard to build community at that point. You might find it a little isolating. And when you move to a new country and maybe don't know the language that well, it is really hard to pick up in a place that is a bit more remote. Now, it doesn't mean you can never move out there, but it does make more sense to move to a place that has more people, maybe more expats as well. And I'm not saying you need to live in an expat bubble. There's definitely ways to meet locals, but sometimes when you move to a new place, it's all very overwhelming and a big life change that you do want to have some of those comforts of at least being able to communicate in English, for example. So you don't want to go too remote, and you might find some really cool properties that are like really good prices. But if you don't know exactly where they are, I would say just wait on it. Get into a place that's a little bigger where you can start building community, meet people, and then as you live here, you can decide if you want to move a little further out. But one really good way to build community that I recommend is if you have a hobby or some sort of special interest that you like, then get into that. Because not only are you going to meet English speakers, not necessarily just Americans, but like English speakers that are also expats, but a lot of Portuguese as well. And the Portuguese have a very high English language proficiency. So speaking English with them isn't so hard, especially if you get into like a sport that you enjoy or just some sort of activity that you enjoy. That's a really fun way to meet people and then even try to learn the language a little bit as well. So just remember that you do have all the visa stuff that you do have to do, but there are other things around the visa that you need to focus on as well, because you are moving here and you want it to be an exciting time. Like it's real life, it's an exciting move. So you don't want to be so focused on the visa that you kind of forget, like, oh yeah, I'm moving to Portugal. How fun is that? So a couple things to also keep in mind if you go beyond the visa is healthcare. Speaking with a healthcare professional, especially if you have pre-existing conditions or you need to see a specialist, you want to make sure that wherever you land in Portugal, there is an English-speaking specialist nearby. Also, just understanding how public and private healthcare works here. Prescriptions, if you take a prescription, it's going to be over here, but it might come under a different name. So that's important to understand that. Get your health records in the US before you come over here too. Maybe any final checks, like I said earlier, taxes, and I'm not going to beat on about this because this is going to be Ryan and John that can talk more about the taxes and financial aspect. But boy, do you want to make sure that you set this stuff up right before you move, because you can get stuck once you move if you haven't done some of this financial planning. So thinking about taxes, and please do note that even though you do not live in the US, you still have to file taxes in the US as a US citizen. You might not be paying, but you still have to file. So at that point, you will be filing in both. So making sure that you're working with someone who understands what that looks like. Are you bringing pets? There's a few things you have to do that you can be doing right now. Make sure they're up to date on their health care, like their health vaccinations and such. But then 10 days before your departure is when you're going to need to do some documentation with the USDA. Well, very sorry that my slides weren't working, but I'm almost done because it is a lot of information, especially if you're just listening. But like I said, pets, shipping, and then because it's a lot to move, it's nice if you have someone picking you up from the airport. You don't have to think about anything. You just look for the person that has your name on the sign, and then you go from there to the accommodation that you already have because it's part of a visa requirement. Okay, so my final thing is I want to circle back to what I asked at the beginning is why Portugal? I asked, is it for the adventure? Is it for safety? Better cost of living, whatever it might be. So be thinking about your why and why Portugal is really important to you. But then also, what is it really like here? I do like to tell people no place is perfect. And so it's important that you're not thinking about I'm running away from something, but you're just excited to actually live in Portugal. And so while we do have a lot to offer here, the safety, the food, one thing I did want to mention as well is on Food Atlas. If you check that website out, they do a top 100 cuisines. And for 2025, 2026, Portugal is number 4. And maybe some of you have never even had Portuguese food or don't even know what Portuguese food would be. But can you believe, and this is voted on by actual people. So can you believe it? Portuguese number 4. It got beat out by Italy, Greece, and Peru, which I thought was interesting. But anyway, the food, there's such a variety and you have options for food. The climate is also something that's, for such a small country, you have a lot of options for different types of weathers that you might want. So what is it really like here? It's amazing, but it's not going to be perfect. But if you set yourself up the right way and you implement things the right way, then you're going to have a very happy move and you're going to be excited about the place that you're moving to. So before I give it back to John and Ryan, last thing is at the beginning, I talked about how obviously I have Expats Everywhere, but then I also have Slate and Key. So Expats Everywhere is a lot more about giving information and resources, and then you can go off on your own and do a lot more on your own, a little more, not DIY, but more like that. But then a lot of you are coming back to me saying, I don't want to do it on my own. Like, oh, I don't want to mess it up, or I'm not really sure how to do this. And it is getting harder nowadays as well to do it on your own. So that's why I was like, okay, I see this need here. And this is something that I love to do. I love to help people. I love to be available for people and answer all these questions, whether it seems small or big or whatever. I love to answer these questions. So I thought, let me start this more bespoke company that allows me to really be hands-on and to really help people with the whole relocation experience, not just the visa. Of course, the visa is included, but all of the experience that it goes on, for moving, because we've moved to a lot of places and we love moving. And so I want people to be excited about moving and moving to Portugal because it is a really great country.
Again, thank you for coming and joining us. I'm just going to wrap up with a very little amount of information because you covered all the stuff, Kalie, but I'm going to cover some financial things. And then we're going to hand it off to Ryan because he and I just really talk about the markets every day. And so none of these are really complete without his additions as well. So my few phases that I'm going to talk about begin with phase number 1. That is day minus 30 to 0. So, if you're thinking about doing a financial plan and you're moving to Portugal in like a month, maybe don't call me, but do. But like, it's really stressful if you're not doing this before you have 1 month to go before your international move, but people do it. Because in that month before you leave, you're about to start the clock on your tax residency. That's what I care about the most. It's just like when you become a Portuguese tax resident, it's kind of over. It's all over but the crying. Like you're going to have to deal with all of the income coming off of your U.S. investments, all of the income that's coming out of your IRAs. If now is time for you to start taking that money, your Social Security again, it's going to get taxed. So what we need to do is we have to optimize your cost basis. We have to reposition your assets. We have to design. We have to be intentional about how your distribution strategy is going to work. Okay, and so if we do a proper cash flow event, we're going to actually work through all of that, and we're going to do that, with some intentionality. Days 1 through 30. Okay, so day 1 being the day that you move to Portugal. Okay, now you're in the country. Now you're going to be getting registered, right? So now you're going to be registering your address. You're going to be confirming your NIF. You're going to be, well, actually, a lot of these things you might have been able to accomplish before you move. And I know Kalie spoke to that, and she's right. So if you get a representative in the country, and Slate and Key can certainly help you with that too, then a lot of this stuff will have already actually taken place. But if you haven't done it, this is what you're going to be doing during your first 30 days of living here. Then you're going to be getting into the stuff that you really only can do once you're here, which is like your healthcare registration, right? So your SNS registration, it can really only occur once you're here and you're properly here. I did this by going into our local centre de Saúde, our health center, and asking, give our family that number. So some of these things you have to do them in person. I see Kalie smiling because she understands that there's some times where you just have to walk in and badger a person in person, and that.
Yeah. If I could just weigh in also, this one is a little bit of a moving target too. Everyone kind of does it a little differently on how they get it. So for example, since we moved when our daughter was 9 months old. And when she was approaching the 1 year, like typical baby vaccinations, you can't go to the private sector for this. You have to do these vaccinations in the public system. And so because of that, where we went, and that's located depending on where you live. So the health center, we didn't have that number yet. And actually we hadn't finalized our residency yet, but they were like, let me just get this number for you. So it's one of those things too, where it's like, there are a few different ways you could go about doing this, but no one is like the exact same. And going in person is so much better than trying to navigate through email. They don't do that well.
Yeah, there are some times where the Portuguese can sort of trick you into thinking they're like gaslighting you to think that like maybe email just doesn't even exist because it's not really a thing. You
Yeah.
can't say, "Oh, I emailed you last Tuesday. Did you not get my email?" Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Like there is a social contract around that still. Sometimes I say graças a Deus, Luciel. Okay, it's very nice. Community building. This is entirely on all of us, of course. I joined a local gaming club because I like to do tabletop gaming, and it was a fabulous way of getting out and actually meeting other members of the Portuguese community. So don't fake it. If you love the bicycle, there's going to be a bicycle club near you where you can just meet people, and that's where you're going to get your language practice in too. Track spending. Of course, your budget's going to change when you move to Portugal, hopefully for the better. But as we've seen, the exchange rates haven't been very good for about a year now. And so with the exchange rate, rates having changed, you sort of have to do a little bit of math around your budget, make sure that you're not overspending because you can buy less euros with dollars right now. And then you're into day 61 to 90. I mean, this is where we meet with a lot of our clients after they've moved and just make sure everything is tightened up and calibrated. Have you been changing your investments? If so, let's make sure that there's not any tax implications. Estate planning is a thing. Your will and your trust, they may not be as valid here as they are in the United States. So we might have to actually update some things with regards to that. We can actually figure out what your tax liability is going to be. Maybe we've taken care of that before we reach the 183-day mark because then we're going to become tax residents. So again, do some of this before you get here. And currency strategy. So yes, like if we know what your cash flow is going to look like, we can begin preparing for what your budget might require in terms of euros savings. The synchronization checklist, I'm just going to leave this for the file. Let this be a reminder. Ask us for the file afterwards. And then I'm going to go through the 5 pitfalls that I see us go through, and then we're going to almost be done here. And so number one is we automatically assume that our taxes are going to be lower now. Obviously, we're Americans. We're going to be subject to taxation forever until you give up that passport. So unless you live in Germany, which that's the funny thing is Europeans can leave their country of residence and say, see ya. And they can change tax residencies, but we can't. Holding foreign mutual funds without understanding that the US hates them. I'm kind of putting too broad of a point on that, but it's true. Is if you hold investments that aren't US grade, the US IRS is going to hate you. And so there are going to be some special taxes that you're going to be subject to, unless you take some measures that we can talk about if you want to at some other time. Missing the residency threshold. I mean, if you're in this room with us here today, you're not going to miss this, will you? So there is a lot more taxation that's going to be placed upon you because there's now going to be two countries watching you once you reach that mark. So please be aware of it. Currency exchange without strategy, this is very Portuguese of you. If you've arrived at this point where you don't think about things until they're just about to happen, think about this, guys. I mean, the exchange rates have driven down the value of the dollar by about 15% in a year. And so if you haven't stockpiled euros, then that's kind of on us. Like you really do have to be prepared for what your budget might look like in the next year. And so sock that money away. Unless we've determined that the strategy is a kind of dollar cost average every 90 days strategy. Whatever your strategy is, like any strategy, you pick it and then you hold to it. Healthcare coverage gaps. Now, somebody asked this question in the chat, and so I'm going to address this right now. Private healthcare is my favorite. So why would you have private healthcare? Well, it's all about the experience, really. And what I mean by that is you're going to have to do a lot of waiting if you just use the universal healthcare option. Okay, there is free healthcare for all. That's the kind that we're talking about that you must get first. You get your NIS for that. But then private healthcare will give you substantially better waiting times, and you'll get access to some private hospitals. And as an American, I'm still weak. I like to be able to count on that. Yes, you're right to laugh at me, Kalie, because it's true. Those of us that stick around, I'm here at the 5-year mark, so I'm sticking around, but sometimes I'm still like, just give me, where's the easy button? Can I get the easy button? And that's very American of me. So yeah, the realities of what being expats have taught us. This is something where Kalie and Josh have actually been a real help for me because they're professional expats. And the first thing that they've seen that I think I've definitely noticed is that real estate has gotten out of hand, right? Now, Kalie, have you noticed that up in Porto? Because in Lisbon, the prices are almost like San Francisco levels. It's like $1 million for a 3-bedroom flat downtown.
Yeah, I was actually seeing something that was comparing Lisbon and Miami, and places in Lisbon were more expensive than places in Miami, which seems crazy. So the prices up here are inflated as well, but not as bad as Lisbon. And I do think a lot of it came down to a supply and demand. Like demand just shot up, and then supply was not there, or at least the supply that people were wanting to either rent or buy, depending on what they were looking for. So that was an issue. Now in Porto, if you look in the sky, there's cranes everywhere. Like there's so much construction going on. So now we're seeing some of these construction being finished and not flooding the market, but getting into the market, which then obviously that takes a little bit of power away from the landlords or people selling because there's more options rather than how it has been where it's people lining up the door trying to get in. So I do feel like we're seeing a little bit of stabilizing, but it was already so low to begin with. It's never going to go back down to how it was. Not this country. You're not going to find those hidden gems anymore like you could have over 5 years ago. But we are seeing a little more stabilizing and hopefully getting to more realistic numbers.
Mm-hmm. And then bureaucracy is real. This is my second point. The bureaucracy is real. I just actually updated my driver's license and had it sent over to this guy's house, Ryan's place. And we did it all online and it was easy. But you're not doing that here in Portugal, are you, Kalie?
No. No. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine just going online and I am John. I'd like to get a new driver's license and here's my visa. Like it's just not happening.
I wanted to share with the field too. John just did we were in on the way to Cascais, and John did a great little YouTube short, just kind of going, "Hey Americans, relax a little bit when you get here. It doesn't happen as fast as New York time." Worth mentioning because this was a message that you were just putting out there.
You must relax.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of sad.
You definitely have to. I think that, here's one thing though I think is interesting is when you become a citizen here, you get your citizen's card and that stuff has a lot more automated. So when we speak with our Portuguese friends and we're like droning on about how like, oh, it's like, how is this stuff so antiquated? How do they not do some of this stuff electronically or automate it? And they're like, what are you talking about? We have that. And they literally have this little portal that they can go in. And so when it works, it works. And when you have access to it, it's not so bad. The problem is they've not caught up with the demand of people coming here and still being either a temporary or a permanent resident and not a citizen. And we don't have access to some of these things. So I'm hopeful that we see that coming in a little bit as they evolve and maybe get better with things. But I do think we have time for that. So yes.
They're definitely good at getting me with those traffic cameras. because in the US I got to get caught, okay? But like here they can get my me without that, and it really pisses me off.
See,
You
they can automate stuff.
That's
And
automated and it works really well. Although they get it to me about 90 days after the fact. Still not
okay.
okay.
Well, but
But
even to give you an example, so we have American friends who have had kids here, and they can get the kid's citizen card and passport within days. So it's like we know that you can process this stuff quickly, but
mm,
yet we've put in for our citizenship and we're looking at least 2 years before we get it. Now, I do understand it's a different
Jesus.
process. They have
Yeah.
to go through background checks and verify who we are, as opposed to a baby who's just born, but they can do some things fast if they want to.
Here's the good news. Utilities and services are cheaper, right? So utilities, groceries, healthcare, no problem, right? Every time I go back to the US, I stop through Trader Joe's. I go, oh my God, how much does this cost? Yeah. So, I mean, you have a family of three. It's
Yeah.
it's it's okay, right?
Yeah. And especially if the big thing is if you buy more local or you buy things that are in season. That's another thing. Like we can get some great berries, for example, but when they're not in season, generally they don't taste as good and they're at least double the price. So if you can adapt in that way, then that's helpful.
Okay, advanced planning. Guys, this is advanced. I'm not going to cover it too deep, okay? But I'm going to say this is that US retirement accounts, that is one heck of a big matzo ball to leave hanging out there. All right. So if you have US investment accounts that you know you have to deal with, come see us because basically the problem is just like once that investment snowball has gathered and gotten like real big, first of all, good job. But second of all, you're going to have to melt that snowball down. And that income that's dripping off of it is going to be dealt with under the auspices of European taxes. Yes. And so that's why a lot of the planning we do is talking about that. Like if you get a big fat 401k, yikes, because all the distributions are going to be subject to progressive taxes over here. Portuguese investment options aren't that great. Somebody asked about these mutual funds in the chat. The problem with that is all of the different investment funds that you can buy here are going to be subject to what's called the PFIC tax, which means, and this is oversimplifying, but basically you're going to get taxed on all those investments at max rates unless we figure out how to get around that, and you can. I feel like we can kind of move on to Ryan's corner because we've got a lot of Q&A. And so if you have more Qs, we have plenty of more A for you. But we're going to talk just for a second about what's going on in the world. Ryan, are there some things going on in the world that we're talking about in our
You know,
capacity
it's
as
been
investment advisors?
it's been so quiet, John. It's been so quiet. No, I mean, this is, I really appreciate that we can do this here today. I've got my little marker. Great. So I'll do a pretty condensed, like 5-6 minute version of this while we're in a new shooting war in the Middle East. But here are the highlights, right? So Iran conflict, oil and inflation in the Fed, what's happening in AI, what's happening in broad markets, and let's talk about currencies. Please continue, John. Yeah, give me a click. And so in the Iran conflict, the Strait of Hormuz is basically shut down. We just had some announcements from the president yesterday about ongoing negotiations to keep this open, threatening drone strikes on energy and stuff like that. Hit next, please. This has caused oil prices to surge. This actually has a really interesting effect. A long time ago, the United States made sure that every barrel of oil traded globally was done using the dollar, referred to as the petrodollar. This allowed us to have greater control when oil manufacturing countries wanted to mess around with supply. Read the 1970s. So we have seen production cuts from other places due to export limitations. This is a boon for domestic oil producers in North America, Canada, and the US. Go next. Chevron CEO yesterday said the Iran impact is not fully priced in. Traders have scant information. I will say, though, and it's worth mentioning, some traders have some great information because about $500 million got invested in oil futures yesterday, right before Trump's announcement. So still a bit of a weird game getting played, and you're not necessarily in the club. We're trying. So inflation and the Fed. Recent meeting here, we just had one on March 18th, headline inflation 2.4. Remember, Fed target 2. The way that this works, though, is you want to suppress interest rates and then ease up on those higher rates before you hit your target. We're not trying to get to 2 because it often overcorrects, but it's a little hard to see this. It'll be easier on the deck when we share it, but these are the projections. The green is what the market has priced, and the purple is what the Fed has said. So they are still talking about a 0.25% drop this year, but go ahead and hit next, John. Oil has a huge effect on inflation. When the cost of a barrel of oil, or therefore a gallon of gas, and I'm not joking about this, when I drive by a gas station on my way to this office here in California, diesel sells for $7.50 a gallon right now. So it's starting to trickle through. That's going to cause more inflation. So that could also be, something here. JPM just said, we don't think there's going to be any cuts this year. We'll see. We'll see. I mean, the Fed does seem to be geared for more rate cuts, but Jerome Powell's holding steady. These are different sectors. Now, I've got two versions of this, but basically, I mean, take a look at XLE, up 32.5 this year. That's pretty crazy. Go figure, right? We're in a shooting war in an oil producing country. You'd think the opposite, but remember, a lot of American oil companies in here, and they like to frack. So we've also got, this is the AI story. So NASDAQ is at a 28x price to earnings multiple. The S&P is 21.5, and that's a pretty big gap. So what we're seeing is actually a pretty big pullback in financials that are helping fund the CapEx investment in AI, but also in the tech itself. So interesting note here with energy, it's not just oil, but take a look at this. The Ohio data center for Meta's AI investment, 3 times New Orleans' entire energy consumption. AI power grid today, 4.4%. By 2028, projected to be 12% of the US energy grid. So go ahead and hit next, John. There's a lot of investment happening in energy because that's what these data centers need. Now, it still remains to be seen, how is this going to happen? But I love this. We can go green, I think. Look at that. Solar representing about 50% of the expected energy investment. I really like this chart. Again, keep an eye out for the slide deck because it shows you where this is coming from. Remember, natural gas is a product of oil extraction. So while we have less and less petroleum creating our energy, it's mostly used for gasoline and diesel. We are seeing, a real need for green energy solutions. So I love it when that, presents an opportunity. Market reaction. So these are actually broken down by the sectors. I just put the tops and the bottoms in order. Energy overall 25, materials, basic materials, steel, about 18. Staples, consumer staples, industrials, and utilities. These are our blue chips, guys, and it's nice when they outperform, right? What are the laggards? Financials, getting kind of hurt by some of those AI investments. Tech, consumer discretionary. Overall, the S&P 500 only up about 0.7 as of yesterday. It was a big update yesterday. Valuation spread. EFI, that's Europe, basically everything but the US. 13 times price to earnings versus 21 for America. That is known as rotation. I think that's an opportunity. Here's last year in the international space, the Eurozone, if you were investing in dollars, up 41%. Year to date, Eurozone up 7 versus the S&P's 0.7. But look at emerging markets in Japan, still looking pretty strong. So I'm still pretty bullish on international. Let's talk about currency and I'll wrap up. So the flip happened. We reached our peak of $1.20 per euro in January. Oh, geez. And now we're down to $1.15. There's due to the oil shock. Hit next. It is not looking like that's necessarily going to reverse. I know this is the same chart as before. I just thought it was worth repeating. The petrodollar really does shore up the dollar. People are fleeing to that stronger currency. And remember, most of the world is on the dollar, whether we like it or not, or they like it or not. And now we're looking at the pound sterling too. There's other currencies that are weakening versus the dollar. Really, the way to look at it is the dollar is strengthening again. And that's largely because oil, right? So when oil prices go up, it'll strengthen the dollar. Yeah, there you go. Forward earnings growth expected in the Eurozone, better than the S&P. We like that. And my last piece, the investment, the European defense investment is only about 35% deployed. Remember, $800 billion committed last year for the European defense industry, and only about a third of it's in. So we've got some pretty good prospects for overseas investment. I'll call it there.
I feel so bad for Ryan. Ladies and gentlemen, give Ryan a hand because he has to do his best Jim Cramer impression. We give him about 5 minutes.
This was a great,
Kalie,
this was a great topic. I really love all this questions about
to be honest, though, I think everyone's going to be like, just show me the deck. I got to really get in there, and it's going to take a lot, to look at those slides. So you were rattling through, but I think being able to actually like take your time and look at it's going to be helpful for the listeners.
It's hard. I mean, he has the job of having to give the nightly business report in the middle of a romance film. We're trying to talk about moving to Portugal here, guys. So thank you. I appreciate it, man. So we have some good questions. 8 open questions remain, and I'm gonna crack through these. So first, we have Marty asking, this is for you, Kalie. Does an American married to someone with EU citizenship have to get one of these visas?
No. No, the fact that you're married, as long as you have a marriage license, then no, it's very easy. You can move over here and then you go to the city hall and you register that you're living here. So much easier if you are married to an EU citizen.
Worth mentioning that the reunification visas can take a while still, but yeah, like way easier. We just heard that from clients. So there was another question in there. I'm just going to tag it on. My husband from Laura. My husband is a Portuguese citizen. I'm a U.S. citizen. We plan on buying a house. Do we still need a visa? And if so, what type? Check out the reunification visa.
No, yeah, that's the same thing as the fact that one of you is a citizen, it's fine. You just have to register that you're here. And then even if it takes a long time, they're not saying that you're illegal. You have time because they know that they're backed up as well. So you can come here comfortably and just go through the process and not feel like you're living in the country illegally if the process is slower than you think.
Anonymous attendee asks, can we explain why you'd set up a domicile if you're becoming a resident of Portugal? Like what determines if you should just have a mailing address or a domicile? What do you think, Kalie? I've got some opinions on this. I know
Yeah,
Charles
I know
Schwab
you'll
doesn't
definitely have
love it.
opinions.
Yeah.
I'll do like the simple thing. Of course, if you just want a mailing address and you have like a family member, a friend, or forwarding, that's one thing. But for the domicile is for tax reasons. So if you have a state that's going to tax you, even if you're not living in there, then that's where you would have issues. So John, did you want to explain that a little more? Because it's more like that's the tax side of things.
It's taxes. I mean, if you've ever tried to get away from the long arm of the franchise tax board in California, those tax rates are upwards of 9+%, more if you tag on the Obamacare surcharge. So there's a lot of taxes that you're paying in your home state if you don't take proactive measures to get yourself out. Now, after you can actually file with the franchise tax board and you can sever your tax nexus, but that is, again, not super straightforward. It's a bit like a witness protection program. You're going to have to get all of those documents together and then and make the case that you're gone. Laura asks a really interesting question. Ryan almost didn't want us to ask. This is tough, but this is a story about gentrification. Laura asks, I watched a depressing video of the state of the Portuguese economy and how most middle-class Portuguese are being squeezed out. Have you noticed this experience with locals during your time there? And have you noticed negative reactions from locals as an American expat? Should I feel guilty? I was brought up as a strong, hardcore Catholic. I always feel guilty. The word in Portuguese is vergonha. Vergonha. Do you feel it? And I do sometimes, but really you shouldn't probably. I mean, I grew up in California and wide swaths of the Inland Empire were almost always experiencing this. There's almost always this effect happening at the micro level or at the macro level or the microcosm of the country. And so I have had this conversation with many Portuguese and they go, look, we'll look after ourselves. All right. We're more happy now than we were 20 years ago. You better believe it. Because now we notice that there are some of us that have wealth, whereas in the past, really none of us had it. So I guess misery loves company. But if you're a high-end realtor here, you can actually stay here. And there are loads of Americans, I know who you are, who are coming here and they're trying to play a material role within the economy here. There are. So is it better or worse to have the wealth effect happening in a neighborhood near you? It's better. Just net. I don't know if you have
As a
anything to tag
visitor,
onto that.
I've just
Yeah.
noticed in general the Portuguese people are awesome. Many English speakers. There's a lot of that connection historically with England, and I mean, certainly I've been yelled at a lot more in U.S. cities than any Portuguese city.
Yeah, for me, I would say there's a lot of noise online and there's a lot of drama online. So, and then also, Portuguese are very kind. So maybe they don't want to say some things to your face, but they feel okay like typing it out. But I think that's a minority. Honestly, when they're kind to your face, they truly mean it. And so while I think it is difficult for some, I think where it hits hardest is those who are about like university age. because and culturally they normally live with their family anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. But if they wanted to go out on their own after just graduating university, then housing prices are hard. But we don't just see that happening in Portugal. We see that happening in the US as well. We see that happening in other countries too. And so it's not just a Portugal problem, I would say. I think a lot of times the middle class has strains. So while Portugal is going through, I think, growing pains, I guess, because there is more interest, it's not like it's so crazy. Like if you look at how many Americans percentage-wise are actually moving compared to other nationalities, we are still very low on the list. So when you hear like that we're, coming crazy amounts in a country that's over 10 million people, it's like thousands of us. So, I mean, that's not that big of a deal. There are obviously, you will see housing prices go up, and maybe it's due to certain factors of, an American spending more money than they should. But then on the other hand, who sold them that? Hopefully it was a Portuguese person, and that Portuguese person is profiting off of that. Because when it comes to real estate, the Portuguese are actually quite rich in real estate. The way they pass it on from generation to generation, they have a lot of real estate. Now, sometimes they can't do anything with it because it's in disrepair, or it's like five people, like five cousins own it. And so there is that issue as well. So, I mean, I think it kind of depends, but overall, the Portuguese are very, very kind people, and I think they're a lot more welcoming than what maybe some stuff says online.
The elusive
Thanks, Katie.
Ricardo. Hello, Ricardo. He asks, does a Portuguese resident visa allow you to live in other EU countries?
No.
No.
No, because you are a resident of Portugal. So not at first, because it's considered a temporary residency card, and you do have a stay requirement, and that stay requirement is for Portugal. Once you get past through the 5 years and you do permanent residency, you have a lot more flexibility there. And then, of course, if you become citizen, then that's massive freedom. But on the temporary residency card, you are supposed to be living and filing taxes in Portugal.
Great one. Danny asks, is the 183 tax residency per calendar year or cumulative days? That's a calendar year, Danny. So if you get here in the back half of the year, congrats. You can usually wait until 183 days into the next year. Anonymous asks, if you cannot invest in foreign mutual funds, can you invest outside of the U.S. market in euros or other currencies? Or do you have to keep your investment accounts in the U.S.? Did you want to answer that one, Ryan?
Me.
Ryan's going like this.
Yeah, woo! Finally, one
Do a
for
little
me.
dance.
Yeah. So specifically, guys, mutual funds, pooled investment vehicles. You go buy Nestle, or other direct individual stocks. You do not violate the same things that John say the IRS is going to hate you. So that's getting into the weeds a little bit. Let's talk about it. This is the kind of thing we keep a short list of appropriate euro-based investments, and there's also ways to invest in those things from the United States. When the dollar weakens, you get a boost. There's a few things to dissect there.
Lisa Nichols asks, can you coordinate with a client's existing U.S. advisor? Well, that's a loaded question, Lisa. You don't have any way to know this, but like a lot of us in financial advisory firms, like imagine the Beatles, right? I know that Paul McCartney tried to find a new home and a new band for many, many years, but generally bands do like to play separately because it's just hard to share the stage together. And that's just an experiential thing. I've tried to work with other advisors, and humans are weird animals. We'll do our best to work together, but that is just a funny piranha pool to step into.
It does get
Right,
tricky,
Ryan? I don't know why. It's
there's
just a
only,
thing.
well, some of it is also there's only about 4 or 5 places where you can park investments left in the United States that have been consolidated into the big guys, and there's only a few of them that'll work with you if you're international. So, there's a few ways to dissect that too.
Well, there's
But
that,
yeah,
but she's more talking about like, can like two
right.
doctors work in the same chamber? And it's like, think about that. Like, yes, they can,
Yeah.
but one doctor is always like, but though, that's not usually us. I don't think it is us. They're like, those guys know what they're doing, but don't replace us with this one. It's challenging. Purba asks, if you own property in California, but you move to another state before moving to Portugal, can you sever residency with California? Indeed, you can. A lot of people do that. Jada says that she plans to start Social Security a month before she gets here. She planned to use that for proof of passive residence. Can she use the confirmation from the Social Security income to meet with the requirements? For sure, right, Kalie? But is that a little bit late?
Yeah, it's a little hard. Normally they look for 3 months before. However, you can have your financial advisor write a letter, and also the Social Security like statements showing that you are going to start drawing off of it and that it's a long-term thing. So there are ways that you could do it, but they are getting stricter with this. So generally 3 months before your initial visa appointment is the best. And then you're covered. But you can do a few things to hopefully make it so it looks okay at the appointment. But
Yeah,
they could be
one
finicky
month.
about it. One
Yeah,
month is tricky. You have to definitely show proof that like this is a long-term thing. But again, remember I said earlier, like the Portuguese like to like live in their little box. And so that might be confusing to them if they're
yeah.
not seeing it go into your bank account, something like that. So 3 months is definitely more secure.
Anytime you have to like give a longer form explanation, I just get just a bit nervous because the person
Mm-hmm.
has the ability to stop you at the window and say, I haven't stopped for my cigarette break and I am a little cranky, so I don't like the look of that. Sorry. It's true. So how long can you visit the other EU countries? Somebody asks. That's just a 90-day tourist visa is what you get for other countries. Danny Sokolsky asks, are Roth account distributions taxed as income in Portugal? Ah, the ever-present. That is a fun question because it's subject to some controversy in social media. But I've done a lot of research with local Portuguese lawyers, and the answer is no. You're not going to be taxed on your Roth accounts because they've already been taxed. But I'm rubbing my hands because I always get nervous because we have to say, but all of the additional gains that have not been taxed by the US, those will be subject to taxation. So if you put $100,000 in the account, you take 120 out, you got $20,000 in gains. So those will be subject at marginal rates here.
And that's true on Roth, just to be really explicit here. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, it's a tricky one.
John, can I jump in here real quick with the question that you
Totally.
answered before? So if you have
Sorry.
a temporary residency card here, then that gives you more than 90 days in the Schengen zone because you are a resident of Portugal. But you do have to be mindful that you do have a stay requirement because you do have to be a tax resident in Portugal. So you can't be outside of Portugal
Oh.
longer than 6 months consecutively or 8 months total, technically, because you're paying tax here and you're a resident here. But if you want to travel around the Schengen more than 90 days, especially if you break it up, you are allowed to do that because it's a different visa. When you come in as an American, it's considered the tourist visa, which you don't have to do anything prior, but you only get 90 days in a 180-day period. When you are a resident here, even though it's a temporary resident to start off with, you have more freedom around the Schengen zone.
Nice. So that I didn't know.
Mhm.
Thank you, Kalie. So Rob asks, any conversations about the grandfathering of applications if and when the 5-year residency requirement becomes a 10-year? Lots of chit chat, but that's
Yeah.
all it is, right? I mean, it's
Yeah, I mean,
speculation.
historically and in their constitution, they do grandfather in, but we just don't know to what extent they're going to. Most likely, they'll grandfather in people who have already submitted their application. So, for example, us, since we did it in the fall. So, if it does change, we're already in. So, it's likely that that will get grandfathered in. But people who have been here maybe 4 years, right when they change it, or 4.5, we're not quite sure yet if they're going to have like almost like a grace period or a rotation period. There's talk there could be, but it's all just chat right now. We don't know. That's something that Parliament will have to hash out.
Yeah. And if you really wanted to drop like a stick of dynamite into this, we could say, what if Chega gets more power? I mean, they've been talking recently about making it impossible for people to get healthcare benefits unless they've been here for 5 years. But that's
I
still
think it
just
was good
speculation.
though. I think it was good the president that that was recently elected. He's been quite friendly with his voting when it comes to like immigration and movement. So I think that's going to be helpful because he does have veto power and such too.
Exactamente. Somebody here says also 3 months before renewal. DB, I
I
forget
think
what
that
we were
was
talking about.
probably in reference to the Social Security topic there. So,
Well,
beauty.
that is a thing of beauty. We cleaned off our plate. Thank you, DB. He agrees. Concordo plenamente. I mean, the last thing to just remember, guys, is we have to learn how to speak Portuguese. If you haven't gotten involved with classes yet and you're moving here, you better get a lead on that because that's the hardest part, right, Kalie?
Yeah, I've got lots of recommendations as well if you need. So
Then
everyone's got a different learning style. So come to me, I can show you different ones.
and watch the videos because Josh and Kalie actually last summer, I think it was last summer, they were taking one of these intensive courses and they gave sort of like daily updates. And that was so interesting because I would like check it on my phone every day and they don't know this, but that's why you're on. That's why you're a public person. And I was like, oh my God. And they've gone through this process. And so that's I think what Slate and Key has to offer too is like just working alongside people that can be your co-pilot that have also had this experience. And again, not trying to kiss up, but Josh and Kalie guys have just so much love for their fellow expats. So
Thank
check
you,
it out.
John.
And
Thank
we
you.
love working with, people with that experience in the seat. We then help optimize the financial side of things. We can work with you, just talk through your financial situation and a plan. So often work really well in conjunction. So glad to be able to contribute here today, guys. Thanks.
Yeah, in the States and here, we're on it. We
Yep.
love this and so much more. So if you guys want to talk to us, you know where to find us. Otherwise, have a great day. Anything else to say, Kalie, before
No, just thanks for having me. And guys, again, I'm sorry that my screen wasn't actually shared the way I thought it was, but thank you for having me, John and Ryan.
All right, guys, that calls it. Have a good afternoon. Ate
Bye.
mais. Ciao.
Adios.